This is why you see a lot of successful people kill it in business and lose in their relationships over and over and over and over again. It's because they try and apply the business skills and the career skills to their personal life, and they don't understand that it doesn't work. And so in your relationships, you have to learn a whole new skill set and a whole new set of tools to make you have a happy and healthy relationship.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Soul's Work Podcast, the show about uncovering our authentic selves through doing both the light work and the shadow work. I'm your host, Janice Ho, and I am here with my very special guest, Tim Johnson from the Couply app. Hi, Tim.
Hello. Hi, Janice. Thanks so much for having me on. How cool is this?
Thank you for being here. For those of you who are not on the YouTube video, like watching us, I would say, come on, come over, join us for the visuals. Because I feel like you're going to get so much more of the dynamic.
Yeah, I've got so many facial expressions, I can't control them.
Totally.
This has been something I've realized rewatching my own podcast back. I'm like, wow, I pull a lot of facial expressions.
I like it though. I find it very engaging. I know you were like, I need to control the nodding a little bit, but no, like it's like...
Yeah, my nodding is out of control. I'm a nodder, so apologies those watching this on YouTube, but hey, that's how I communicate.
It's all good. Okay, well, if you don't mind introducing yourself a little bit more, tell us about the app, the podcast, who are you, whatever you want our audience to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Tim Johnson here, and Janice and I got connected because I was a fan of your podcast already. I've really enjoyed the work that you've been doing with it, and it's been so cool to see how open, vulnerable, honest you've been, as well as like just seeing all your knowledge growth and all the stuff that you're learning as you go through therapy school as well. So that's kind of how we met. And I have an app for couples, and I've been on this long journey. I've worked in the tech space. I've worked for an incredible app that saw amazing success, and I had my best friend worked in the space as a developer and had this idea. There are so many apps out there that help us get into relationships, but what about an app that can help us stay in a relationship? My history that we can get into, I have been married, I was divorced, and I started to do some of the work that Janice has been talking about and started to discover all of this amazing information. And I thought, right now, you can't interact with it as well as you can if we built an app for couples. And that was our mission. We built Couply, and we've helped 350,000 people with their relationships so far, and going strong. So that's kind of the journey and a little bit more about me.
Amazing. And now you just literally launched your own podcast. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Couply Relationship Advice. And this is where we speak to relationship experts and ask them all the things that they're seeing and help people create incredible relationships that last forever. That is our goal.
Beautiful. Well, it's super exciting. And I feel like every time you and I have a conversation, it always feels like a podcast episode. We're like, why didn't we press record on that?
I know.
We could have already had an entire podcast already, you and I, Tim.
Series. Exactly. And honestly, it's since I've started this podcast, I've been nerding out on the equipment, and I've started buying everything. And now we can, Janice. Now we can. I've got the fancy Zoom H6 professional recorder. That's it. Every time we hang out, I'm pressing record just in case.
I love it. Okay, so I mean, there's so many things I want to dive into with you. But I would love it if you could maybe tell us, like, describe the Couply app a little bit more. Like, what kind of features does it have? I actually jumped in there recently because you know that I wasn't on it because I didn't really have anyone to do it with. But I thought, let me just like sneak a peek in there. And since I don't have an actual partner to like link it to, I couldn't really do some of the activities together, but I just wanted to get a look, and I was like, oh, this is so nice. Like, I can see how it would be like a really great bonding experience, getting to know each other, getting to plan dates and things like that. So maybe if you can tell us a little bit more about that. And also, like, what was your motivation behind like creating it in the way that you did? Like, did you experience your own gaps in your own relationships, or you were seeing certain things that were missing for couples around you that you felt oh, you know what? If we design the app in this way, like these are things that could really, really help build that intimacy, deepen the relationships, kind of keep the spark going.
Yeah. Oh, this is such a fun question. So for building the app, there are kind of three major things that we wanted to create it around. And essentially, the idea is around keeping couples on the same page, igniting the spark in their relationship. And so, the first thing around getting on the same page, there's a few elements. And the final thing is dates, making sure that people are going out and spending quality time together. So, keeping couples on the same page. What we wanted to do there was really help people understand that people bring different perspectives to things. And a really amazing way of doing this is through personality quizzes. And some quiz results are really long term. So, for example, it's not going to change if you're a detail-oriented person versus not a detail-oriented person. That doesn't change. If you're introverted or more extroverted, that tends to not change that much. Unless you're introverted because you got a lack of social skills and you learn some social skills and you realize that you actually do enjoy connecting with people, that might shift it a bit. But on the whole, if you get energy from social situations or energy sort of thinking about things, being more by yourself, that tends to stay the same. Other things can change, like love languages can really shift. Our attachment styles will shift as we're in different relationships, and they hopefully bring out the best in us or the worst in us. So the quizzes in Couply, we design them to be an awesome snapshot. And so you immediately start to realize, wow, my partner's actually different to me. And so many of relationship problems stem from us assuming that what we hold in our mind is identical to what our partner is holding in their mind. And that's how those miscommunications start to happen. So the first aspect of the Couply app is personality quizzes. This is where it gets kind of cool. You take those personality quizzes, then you get custom date ideas and relationship advice based on not you, but your partner's personality. So for the love language style, right? Right now, your partner maybe has a love style of words of affirmation or quality time. Couply will then give you date ideas that meet that need that you can do with your partner. So it sparks some ideas there.
Okay, let me ask you, what's your love language and what's your partner's?
Mine is quality time and physical touch. And my partner's is, it always was quality time. We've redone it. And I think since the pandemic, it's moved from quality time because we live together, work together, spend a lot of time together, to acts of service. So that's more like doing more things and getting stuff done.
So can you
and
give
also
and
touch.
also physical. Oh, okay, so you have the physical touch in common, and then there's quality time, acts of service. Do you ever find that sometimes it feels a bit like out of alignment when you don't have the exact same sort of love language, where maybe like you're really craving to receive more quality time from your partner, but like now, like you said, she's sort of shifted away from that, and so how do you manage that? How do you still really like stay in sync or have that feeling of connection when you're trying to, like cater or like really meet their needs for their love language while maybe it's not totally in sync with yours?
The magic of relationships is that you can communicate those needs, right? And if you're in a great relationship, then your partner will satisfy them. So you can have, depending on each relationship, and it's really about finding strategies and things that work for your relationship. But for my relationship, we've got date night that we always do on Wednesdays typically. So we'll like explore different restaurants, do different takeouts, depending on how we're feeling. And we also travel a lot, and that is where you really like get all that quality time in. That's kind of what's been working really well for us. On the acts of service, for me, I've had some really good reminders. I did a TikTok about this, which didn't do very well. So if you're one of the 50 people that saw it, then you'll know what I'm about to say. But for me, like little reminders for acts of service for me are if I walk past the sink or the kitchen and there's stuff that's in disarray, I just will, if I have 10 minutes, I will just clean it. I'll just organize things. I'll just clean stuff up. And it's really small, but my partner super appreciates it. And she also verbalizes that appreciation, which is really nice. She's like, hey, it was very, very cool when I came down today that the downstairs was immaculate. Thank you so much for taking some time to do that. And I was like,
that's helpful.
No problem. No problem.
Especially when you don't have necessarily that like super intrinsic motivation to do it yourself. Like maybe you don't care as much if the place is spotless. I definitely just don't think about it. And quite honestly, I don't see it as well. It's invisible to me. Yeah.
Which is terrible. It's terrible to say, but I have to be honest, right? It's not something that is on my mind. So I have to consciously make an effort to be like, oh no, I left and I'm looking at it now because I need to, after this, I will go and clean the counters. It's just different. And that's completely okay. But it's a case of being like, I know this bugs my partner, so I'm going to do it. She appreciates it. It builds happiness in the relationship. And there's little things that you can do to make it easier on yourself. So like if I'm doing it with a podcast on. So I'm not doing it by myself. I'm learning and cleaning at the same time. Just getting that job done. And this is like 10 minutes, not like a big deal. It doesn't take long to put stuff away. There we go.
Yeah, for sure. Okay,
keep going. But it's meaningful. It's meaningful. Sorry, I will say this, Janice. No, please. It's meaningful. Because like relationships tend to end not on the big stuff, but on the small stuff. Typically. Not always, but in relationships, especially if you're living together and you have life together, you have a lot of admin together that you have to get through. So making this admin seamless is a really big part of getting aligned, and getting aligned helps you build that relationship. So like this stuff can seem so small, but as I'm sure you're learning in your course, and when we speak to couples experts and couples therapists, they're like, oh no, it's the small stuff and doing small things every day. These are what actually build an amazing, really solid relationship. It's doing these small things together, laying on the foundations, the brickwork, making this structure solid, doing small things every day. It is important.
Love that. Well, good for you. Because I know it is effort. It is that conscious effort that like, I think a lot of people they just wouldn't do it, right? Like it would just feel like nagging perhaps if they're hearing from their partner, like, this is important to me, like, can you please do this? But I think also it's that communication of how does a person ask the other person to meet a need that is like a little bit hard for the other person to just like intuitively do it, right?
Oh yeah, there's so many things in relationship where if you have a 1% difference, it means it becomes 100% different in relationship, right? If you're someone where for you the car needs to be cleaned, you want a clean car, right? Or you want a spotless car on the inside. You can't handle having people's bits and bobs around. If that's something that's important to you, but it's not, it's just like your partner likes a clean car, but they're okay if it's not cleaned all the time, then 100% of the time you're going to be like, the car is dirty, you haven't done, you know what I mean? It's just 1%. It might just be a couple of percent off. But these things where it's just a couple of percent off can mean that 100% of the time it's always you doing this, or it's always your partner doing that one thing. So that's why this communication, being cognizant about these things and discussing and talking about it is important. And they're like really simple questions that can help you get aligned. Really simple questions that can bring it up in a soft way that can help you understand each other. So it's the minutia, but I get passionate about it, as you can see.
No, please do, please. It's good. It is important for sure. Okay, so what was the next thing after the quizzes?
So the quizzes help you understand each other's personality, right? As you understand these deeper things about each other, the questions, we have daily questions. Some are fun, some are deep, some are really tricky, some are silly, some are conundrums, some are dilemmas. We have these questions that will just keep you understanding more about your partner. The Gottmans call this like looking at love maps. So the idea behind it is that you rebuild and you're constantly going over your love maps because people change. We know that people change. We're constantly growing and developing. Our circumstances are changing. We're getting older. And it's important that we continually invest in understanding what is going on in our partner's mind. There's this really sad statistic, and it's that couples actually know each other best in the first 2 years of their relationship. And as that relationship goes on, they actually learn less and less and less about each other's internal worlds, unless they're constantly investing in their love maps and constantly asking each other new questions, discovering what they're thinking about one another. And so we prompt those questions.
What are
we
some
prompt
questions?
them each day. We have so many fun ones. Fun ones are like, okay, you've been invited to Mars. You have the opportunity to be one of the first people to go to Mars with your partner. Do you take it or not? Why?
Ooh.
It's a great question. It's so interesting.
It's a great question. Okay, let's answer it right now. Do you go to Mars with your partner? Are you going to?
I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm perfectly happy on Earth. I like reading science fiction. I like writing. I like writing science fiction. But you put yourself in an exploratory ship, you might not be coming back. And some people might be fine with that. It's really about the legacy, about being part of history. But telling you the truth, the adventure, making some amazing memories together. Of course, it would be cool. You could even if you're having children, imagine having the first Martian child. You're in the history books forever, right? It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But for me, there's a lot of risk attached to that. And I read so much sci-fi where things go wrong in space. So I know all of the things that could go wrong.
Okay, I'm sensing a careful, perhaps, nature about you. Very so I'm almost wondering, if you have this conversation with your partner, is she learning maybe something about you here as to like how much risk are you willing to take and how much
Absolutely.
are you kind of
Yeah, it is. It does it does speak to that. And I mean, look, I'm a founder, an entrepreneur, so I've got enough risk in my life already. I feel like
so very true.
I got plenty of risk, and not great with heights or acceleration. So those are like two things that I think are like quite important to be good with being an astronaut.
I love this though, because then it's not really necessarily about like, would you literally go to Mars, but it's just the conversation that happens around it and learning more about that person, what makes them tick, what do they kind of want to avoid, what are they comfortable with. So yeah, can you give us one more question?
Yeah, here's a good one, Janice. So would you rather go 200 years into the future and meet your future relatives, or go 200 years in the past and explore the past?
Oh, I just got like chills. I got chills. Okay, well, first off, I don't plan to have kids. So that makes it a little bit easier because, I mean, obviously I'll have relatives in the future, but also I am fascinated by just understanding more about my ancestors, where I came from, and, you know, like what happened back then. So I would definitely pick the 200 years ago, and it'd be like really, I think, connecting with something very profound and deep, and also maybe learning more about myself and how I've become the way that I've become, which is so reflective of who I am. Yeah, what about you?
It'd be really fascinating. I think 200 years ago, my ancestors were knocking around Egypt, Tunisia, and some just in London grinding away in East London. So I would be really curious to see like my Egyptian, Armenian, Tunisian ancestors. I wouldn't care as much about being in London 200 years ago. No, thank you. But no, I'm 1,000% getting in that time machine and zipping to the future. I'd be really curious at what the future holds for us, especially when it comes to relationship stuff. Like what is happening here, the intersection of relationship technology. You know, we talk about it a lot. I'm so really curious at what's happening. Like, have they made domestic robots? Are there sex robots? Are people having AI relationships? We're already seeing that start to happen. How weird has that got? Right. What has happened? I can't wait to discover that stuff. So,
okay,
going to the future.
All right, got it. Okay, so are we on to the third aspect of the app?
Dates. So a big part of relationships is actually still continuing to date your partner. I think I spoke about that first 2 years where you know each other really deeply, and me and you have spoken about this before the podcast. But in relationships, there are these phases, right? You have limerence, the amazing honeymoon period where your brain's flooded with hormones and neurotransmitters, and you're showing all of the best sides of yourself to your partner. Anything they say, you're so receptive to it. You want to understand them. And then as those chemicals fade away, it's like we suddenly see that all of these positives that we loved have these like shadows, right? They're all of the things that, guess what? If you want a partner that's really organized, they're not going to be as flexible. Or if you have a partner that has always want to do new things, maybe they're really scattered and disorganized. So each of our things have different positives and negatives. And as we understand, as these kind of fade away, we stop really courting our partner. We stop doing special things for them. So Couply kind of gives you a very friendly and loving kick up the arse to go on some dates, to do some romantic things, do some surprises, make some effort, and just keep the spark going. And these again, similar to the questions, some are deep and meaningful, some are fun, some are silly, and that's all completely okay.
What are some like date nights that you love to do? Do they tend to be more
drawing each other is just like so funny.
Drawing each other.
So we had just buying from the dollar store some paper, pencils, and do a date night where you draw each other. It's hilarious because you know most of us haven't practiced much drawing since we were a kid, by the way. And it's also just like there's a lot of intention there. You're really looking at your partner. They're really looking at you.
I feel like it's very intimate and sensual almost.
Yeah. Until they turn that paper around and you're like, what was that? But it's fun. It's really fun.
I love that idea.
So that's a good one. And then writing a song or a rap together is also a really fun one. Like doing a rap about you, a couple's rap about you as a couple. Have you and your partner done that? We've got to do that one actually. We have a few songs, but I think we need like a proper rap. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What about a more like quote unquote serious or like romantic when you really wanna?
Yeah, we have a couple. So actually, I was speaking to one of our community members a week ago, and she said this. She was like, my partner got one of your date ideas, and it was a surprise dinner date. And she was like, my husband is incredibly blue collar. He works in agriculture. He's out all day. He knew that I was going out and running errands. When I came back, the house was immaculate. The dining table was laid. He had plates. He had fresh flowers. He had a tablecloth. He'd never done that for me in our entire relationship. Wow. We have a very traditional relationship. I don't work. He does. I cook. He works. Like, we have a traditional relationship. For him to do that for me as a complete surprise, I almost broke down in tears. It was such a gift. And I said to him, where did you get this from? Wait, how come you're doing this? And he said, Couply told me to do it. And I thought, you know what? I am going to do that. I am going to be that husband that does this. I thought, how cool is that? That someone that someone's just getting to experience something new and fresh. And it is that case of you're really courting your partner, or, you know, you're making an effort for them. So that's a big one. Another one that couples really love, that we've had couples talk about, is the sensual massage one. And we had one of our users, we spoke to him, and he said, like, I had not been touched by my wife like that in years. Wow. And it was amazing. Like, thank you so much. I'm telling all of my friends, download this app. Like, his love style is physical touch, and his partner wasn't. And then he got an amazing massage from his wife, and they hadn't connected like that in a long time. So that's great. That's really exciting.
I love that. And I imagine
Yeah.
that there's something about an app, this sort of almost third party, that is
Yeah.
kind of like giving
Yeah.
ideas and
It's
encouraging,
ideas.
that
Exactly.
almost like makes it in a way a little bit less vulnerable versus
Yeah.
having to be the one to initiate
Hmm.
or to like suggest something. Because I imagine that, especially for, let's say, for that person who had never done that before, to do the whole dinner thing, or even
Hmm.
for the person who did the massage, right? Like,
Hmm.
maybe when something is so foreign to a
Mm.
person and it hasn't been part of the relationship in for so long, but maybe it seems like a good idea. Like, I feel like a lot of times people in relationships won't bring it up because just even
Mm.
saying it is scary, because it's like, oh, what if they
Mm.
think it's dumb, or what if I can't do
Yeah.
it right, or whatever. But I feel like maybe having an app or like this outside
Yeah.
neutral thing that's
Yeah.
like the relationship expert is like,
Yeah.
it almost like puts that pressure off, and it's like, oh, the app told me to do it, you know.
Exactly. It doesn't go right. Blame it on us. Blame it on us. We'll take the blame, and it's okay, right? But
Yeah.
I don't think in any case that any partner would not appreciate it, right? Even if things don't go 100%,
You
in
would
most
hope
cases,
so. You would hope so. But I'm just saying,
yeah,
sometimes, you know.
of course, yeah. Sometimes these things do go wrong, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it is the case of being like, hey, this isn't my idea. So if it does go wrong, I can blame it on something else. And if it goes right, I kind of take the credit because I did it anyway.
But have you ever found that even for yourself, or like if you've seen it in other relationships that have been that really long going, you know, over time, things sort of fade away, people get into a routine and it's
Mm,
sort of lost its magic. There isn't the new exploration or the
mm.
sensuality or whatever, that it almost becomes uncomfortable to kind of get back into that mode.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what so many people talk about. This is the big problem in so many relationships, right? Is that you get into a routine, you don't see your partner in a new way. If you have conflict, those conflicts start to become repetitive. You start to learn the dance steps of those conflicts, and then you can repeat them, and you get into this negative cycle. And the average couple waits 6 years. They do this for 6 years of being kind of
Mm,
unhappy before they start to think, okay, we actually need to get help or break up.
yeah.
And so, yeah, you're 100% right. This is something that happens. But there's lots of couples that don't have that too. A lot of couples are managing to have great relationships as well. And I think, we often focus on the 40% of couples that don't make it,
Mm,
but there's 60% that are doing pretty good too. I think that's
mm. Yeah. And you've
it's
been
a
in your
good thing.
relationship for quite a while now, right?
Five
Like
years.
five
Yeah.
years. And I'm assuming that, especially doing the app and paying so much attention to all of these different practices and ways of keeping a relationship going, like I'm pretty
Mm.
sure you're like super cognizant of that all the time in your own relationship and integrating these
Yeah.
things. Or do you find that it's still like difficult as fuck?
You you definitely I mean, everyone is still human. We all make human mistakes. Like I remember like we worked on this big communication course. I remember like working on it so hard and then having an argument that I was the contributor to and was like, "Oh goodness, everything that I've just been working on this week, I did the opposite to." You know?
Yeah.
Um you're definitely still human, so you definitely make mistakes and you definitely make errors. But I've definitely learnt so much and have changed so much and
Mm,
feel so happy and I'm so happy in my relationship and feel like I've built a new toolkit that I didn't have before that hasn't just helped my romantic relationships, but has helped my relationship with my friends, with my families, with my colleagues. Really like just just have access to a whole new toolkit
yeah.
of ways to connect, and I think
Yeah.
that's been a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that you're bringing that up because I definitely wanted to dive into that as well. Because, like, we've been talking a lot about, things to do with our partner. And I always think about relationships as like there's the you and I, and part of
Mm,
that is like, what are these things that we're actively doing, these actions, these like ways of relating that
yeah.
keep us kind of going together. And then I always think about the two individuals that bring in
Mm,
all their stuff into that
yeah.
dynamic. And what is each person doing to kind of work on their own, whether it's their unresolved trauma patterns or, you know, whatever tools they have and ways of communication and all of that. So I love that we're kind of shifting into this piece. And I know that we had a conversation about how you had to shift thinking about these sort of communication tools, the ways that you were sort of like learning how to communicate in work, for example. You're like, oh shit, this doesn't actually work in relationships, things around what you called like the male psyche and the ego and how it was like that learning curve for you and the sort of individual work you did on yourself to, you know, show up in your relationships in a different way.
I really placed so much emphasis on being right for really a lot of my life. Like, I think I had to learn assertiveness as I was going through university and my like first kind of jobs and the times when to be assertive, and debate was such a great tool for that, because when you debate, you're given the topic. It's like pick the position, you have to defend it, right? And I really learned so much debating people and got much more comfortable being in an uncomfortable place in a difficult conversation. So debate developed some really good skill sets there that are excellent for certain things, right? they're excellent for job things, for career stuff. And you'll see people that are naturally assertive do so well in their careers. And it's healthy. There's like a really good, healthy level of assertiveness and a healthy time to use these skills.
Right.
A lot of them are pretty crappy in relationships, right? This is why you see a lot of successful people kill it in business and lose in their relationships over and over and over and over again. It's because they try and apply the business skills and the career skills to their personal life, and they don't understand that it doesn't work. And so in your relationships, you have to learn a whole new skill set and a whole new set of tools to make you have a happy and healthy relationship, because the goal is shifted from being right and winning to being on the same page and understanding. Not even being on the same page necessarily, but just understanding your partner's perspective. And that is a completely different skill set. That is like, instead of having a conversation where you're opposite each other, it is switching that and standing side by side and trying to look at something together, and both of you trying to make sure that you're really seeing your partner's perspective on things. And I didn't learn that. I think I've only really started to learn that in these last few years. So it's something new, and probably why I talk about it a lot, because as I understood that, it completely shifted my mind, and completely shifted the way that I interacted, not just with my partner, but anyone that I truly cared about. And that's been really cool. That's been really cool, actually, to go through that process.
And I'm curious, like, what has that process like actually looked like for you? Like, what has that involved in? I know we've talked about there's the unlearning piece, and then there's like the learning piece of the new things. Like, what have you actually had to do to unlearn some of that? You know, the ways that you were showing up, those patterns, and then like, how did you start to learn these new skills and tools and stuff?
Because I have a fairly unique position here, because I'm like hands-on, we're hands-in, we're building the app every day. I'm exploring this every single day as my full-time job for our community, right? It is literally my job to look into this stuff. I'm doing the work.
That's so fun. That's so amazing.
So
oh,
it's so
I love
fun.
it. I love it.
It's so fun. And so it's my job to do the research. It's my job to write about this. It's my job to talk to our users about this. It's my job to interview experts about this. Like, this is my job. So I have been looking at this so deeply. So that's a little bit of like an unfair advantage that I have, in that we've been doing this like as a side hustle and now as our job. So we've been in it part-time and then full-time. So that's been the first thing. The next thing is like, you can start to create little systems for yourself depending on who you are and how you think. But a little system for me that's been really good is often if people are trying, if someone is coming at you with emotion, or they're asking, they might not be verbalizing something, but they might be asking you to do something by groaning if they're lifting something up, right? Like, oh, like they're not asking for you to come and like pick it up for them, but they really are asking. It's a call for communication. It's a call for connection, right? If they're furiously scrubbing a counter, you might be like, oh, that seems to be like, they seem to be furiously scrubbing a counter. You either think like they're probably fine, or you can ask them like, hey, do you want a hand? And they might say like, no, I'm fine, or it's fine. And we all know when someone says it's fine, it's not fine. So you might as well just go and help them out, right, with what they're doing. You might as well join them. Often these calls for connections cannot be what they first seem, right? And it's the same with conversations. Sometimes you're having a conversation with someone about one thing, but it's actually about something completely different. And being able to spot that and look deeper and ask these questions, and you start to stand beside them. Okay, well, why are you feeling like that? Tell me more about that. Okay, well, how's that making you feel? Oh God, okay, I completely understand why you'd feel like that. What can we do differently here? Or sometimes it's like, hey, I'm actually feeling like this. Are you open to hearing my perspective on this and how I feel? Okay, great. This is why I'm feeling this way. What do you think about that? How does that make you feel? It's completely different than being like, you did this and it's caused that, right? You're approaching these conversations a completely different way, and they go in such a different way. And I love that. That's been such a gift in this process, that I really just hope we can plant the seeds with people using Couply, and plant that gift too, to avoid, to have people learn new dance steps for these repeating arguments, and get really curious about their partner, and have some really healthy, growing conversations.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And that's what I'm practicing all the time in my training program, therapist training program, which is
Really?
real. Yeah, totally. Because it's all about relationships, right? Like the therapist client relationship is a relationship. And so much of what we're doing in this first year, which is about the self, that I've been doing in therapy a lot too, is really uncovering like what is actually really going on for us, which I think is always like the first starting place. Like, are we even aware of what is going on for us in that moment, instead of coming from a place of defensiveness? And then from that place, it's like communicating how we're maybe being impacted by something going on. This is how I feel, versus coming at it from that attacking, sort of blaming you place.
Yeah.
Sort of already coming at it with an interpretation or an evaluation of why they're doing some behavior that we don't like. But to get curious, as you're saying, and for them to have a chance to respond, and then to have that open dialogue where it's really just sharing from a place of like, I more than you. And so it always takes two, though, of course, like for that other person to also be aware enough about what their process is and what's going on for them. So again, just like how each individual are bringing their own stuff into it. And is there that self-awareness, that willingness to maybe self-reflect and be curious about even their own selves, and to be like brave enough to say the thing to the other person, because sometimes it's really hard to be that vulnerable and transparent about like, actually I felt really hurt by that, or I felt angry by that, or I felt ashamed when I heard you say this thing, or whatever the case may be. But I find that when we can go into those layers, that is where real intimacy and connection and understanding and growth happen.
Those moments are such beautiful moments for connection, and that's a reframing in itself. If someone is attacking you, it's because they have passion, it's because they have emotion, and it's not, it might feel bad, but it's actually an amazing moment for connection. It is an amazing moment for connection. It is a moment for you to, if you look at it as that, it will completely reframe the way that you have these conversations. Because you might be feeling, okay, initially your defenses are naturally going to go up, and then you have to think, okay, an attack is still an opportunity for connection, right? But I mean, you also get people that just get in the habit of criticizing, blaming, and attacking, and that's their cycle, that's their communication style. They don't have a growth mindset. They're not willing to work on their stuff. A good test is if you're able to have a meta conversation about communication. So if you're able with your partner to raise it up one level, be like, it's interesting how we have different communication styles. This is why we love the quizzes in Couply, because they immediately give you that jumping point to have a meta conversation about communications. You're communicating about communicating.
Totally.
Great thing for couples to do, and start setting your little communication rule book, or letting the people know your rule book. It's like, oh, I noticed when you do that, I do this, and I think it's because of this. These conversations are really powerful for starting to name your playbook, name your rule book, talk about your patterns, talk about the things that you tend to do. If you can, do the work to dig up the values, dig up the trauma, and talk about the things that are causing it. If you can get there, incredible, right? And then you're gonna, once you see your partner being vulnerable, the depth, right? The depth that brings.
Yeah.
If you can be kind as well, and honor it and recognize it and explore that with them, really, really, really powerful stuff. This is like, in my opinion, Janice, I'm curious your opinion. I feel like this is like super advanced relationship stuff. That I really hope that we can help guide people to. And again, it amazing for your romantic relationships, but I do think all relationships can benefit.
Totally, for sure. And talking about these different communication styles is reminding me of like the anxious avoidant attachment dynamic, which like tends to be a common like pairing, and has, you know, we've talked about this so much, but that was definitely my pattern for a long time. And I was remembering how like when I was with my last monogamous partner, in that I was more anxious and he was a bit more avoidant tendencies. Although, again, not to label anyone, but we could draw that out from each other. And I remember how at the beginning, I really felt like the only way to communicate was like, we got to deal with this right now. We got to talk about it as it's happening, because that was how I felt it was the right way to communicate. And I didn't want things to linger. And but it was also coming from this sense of urgency that I had of like, this is an emergency. We are not okay. We must be okay. And the only way to do that is to like resolve this at this moment. But I didn't really truly understand, even though he absolutely tried to communicate it to me, that he needed time. He needed some space to process first and be on his own about it. But because I had not worked through my anxious attachment trauma and all of that, I could not allow him to have his space without totally feeling like my world was going to end, you know? So I'm thinking about all the work that I've done, that unlearning work, and then the learning to, you know, be able to, you know, they call it self-soothing or whatever, but I think just it's really about like being able to self-regulate, like to be able to like be okay no matter what is happening with that other person, but also to communicate like, hey, like, cool if you need some time to like process some things before you come back to me, but can you just let me know you're gonna come back to me, and like when, you know, like I think that really like is something for people who are a little bit more on the anxious side to just know like that you're gonna check in, you're not gonna just totally disappear. And I know you're smiling because you know what I'm talking about.
100%. Yeah, it's great. I love this.
But there had to be a shift for me too, right? Like it wasn't just my way or that's it. That it's like these other ways of communicating can exist, and that I can adjust and adapt and shift if I want to with this person who has a different communication style. But it does require work on my part if it is something that is going to be activating old wounds for me. And it's been really cool, though, to see how it has shifted for me. And when I had a more recent interaction with somebody who needed their space, that I was able to do that without falling apart and knowing like we're going to be okay. But that's because we had also built a secure relationship. So I knew whatever happens, we're going to work this out. I can give them a day or two or whatever.
Yeah. Did you communicate that with them through like the lens of attachment as well, or no?
Like this last
this one where you're saying happened? Like, hey, I was comfortable, I could give them their space. Did you say like, hey, I have an anxious attachment style, I want to solve things, I'm guessing you're a little bit more on the avoidance side, I'll give you space, but you've got to give me if we fall out, like, I need to know that we can talk. Like, did you have that conversation?
We had that conversation early on.
Great.
Like,
Yeah,
like one of our
great.
first dates. Like, I was just
Great.
I was talking about just this need for like clarity and communication, and they mentioned that they sometimes do need to and I was like, oh yeah, like that reminds me of, you know, my past. But, you know, for me it's like just knowing and having that communication that like they're gonna come back to me. And so we had that understanding that that was important. But I've also like, I'm also just less rigid about it. You know, I've also shifted on my end where it's like, I don't need to be so forceful that like, this is how it must be or else. You know?
You've let go of being right. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Back to that thing.
Yeah. You let go of being like, it's because I think this, then it is thus, you know?
Yeah. Or I'm not going to be okay without you doing what I need you to do. Right. So taking a little bit more ownership or agency, to just be okay myself no matter what happens. And even if they become super avoidant, that I'm going to be okay because I can walk away if I'm not okay with it, right? So, yeah, just shifting from that more like external focus, like you must do everything in this manner for me to be okay in this relationship, to a bit more of a balance.
Yeah, and me and my partner in that classic, I am slightly more anxious, she's slightly more avoidant, and I mean, I think both of us we have the attachment style quiz in Couply, and it's awesome to do because you can tab across and see your attachment styles and what percentage you are, and you can see their attachment styles and what percentage
it has
they
percentage.
Are.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which is good to see, right? Because you see an actual number and you're like, okay, this makes sense. I'm 34% anxious, mostly secure. My partner is half secure, half avoidant, so a little bit more on the avoidant side. But it's also like, you know, you think things and you have these thoughts and you're like, is that a true thought or is that just an anxious attachment style thought? I always have that. And Janice and I have joked about like some of the situations, but it was when my partner's taking a really long time to come back from a mall.
Right.
And I was like, I called her and I was like, oh, she didn't pick up. I was like, that's weird. And then it was just like, first voice was like, well, why wouldn't she pick up? I was like, okay, well, she's probably just looking or shopping. It's like, or she's been kidnapped. And you're like, oh my God, you're right. And then the 24 hours are the most important. And I'm just like letting the clock run. And the police could be like looking for her right now. And like, that is your anxious attachment style, just like in your ear, because you're worried and you're worried that something's gone wrong. You're worried something's going wrong in your relationship, or you're worried that you said something. And it's
can you tell now, like when it's happening? Like, can you tell the difference
100%.
Between? Yeah, because like we're trained to like really notice like what's happening in our bodies, and I think the more that I've done that, when I know, oh, I'm in that anxious attachment, trauma is being poked into right now, and feeling the emergency, like what that feels like in my body. Like for me, it's often like this racing heart, my stomach feels like it's in kind of knots, like I have a lot of like fog in my brain, it's like swirling never ending thoughts, like all of that. And then
you need to talk it out, and you're like, luckily there's the only way is to have a very 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 long conversation like about this topic for a very long time. Like this is the only way.
But or can we take a pause in that moment? And learning to take that pause and being able to like come back down a bit before we react, right? So I think oftentimes when we're reacting in that kind of emergency mode, we do all the things that maybe isn't the best for our relationship or ourselves.
Oh gosh, yeah. And you see this over and over and over and over again. Like I guess I'm lucky that I have that much larger secure part of the pie, that my anxious attachment style isn't reactionary. It's just normally like thoughts and being like, you know, if I don't hear from my partner, immediately assuming that they're dead. I'm like, well, they're dead and kidnapped. They've always been kidnapped. So my mind goes to that. Or wanting to talk things out immediately if we have a moment of disconnection, or someone gets activated, and we get pissed off at each other. I then want to talk it out like then and there. And my partner wants some space to think about it, but we have that agreement where I'm like, sure, I will give you my space, but let's say we're going to connect on this tomorrow, or like we will reconnect on connecting on this tomorrow. And she's like, yes, let's talk about this tomorrow, but right now I just want to spend some time by myself. I'm like, okay, you go and do that. I'm going to go meet my friends. It's totally fine.
I love that. And
we have that.
yeah, no, that's
and my deal is like, you can't shut down. I can't be with someone that just shuts down, right? Like, no shutting down. That's like, so we both have this thing. I'm not going to try and incessantly talk it out at that moment. You're not going to shut down. We're good.
Are there times though where that doesn't pan out quite? Because, obviously there are times where we just get super activated and we're in our default trauma response, and maybe she does shut down, or maybe you are just like, oh fuck, I just got to talk this out right now. How do we create room and space for there to be that sort of like messiness and maybe ebb and flow, or like the ups and downs in the relationship, where it's not always gonna be, because that's the other thing I've had to learn as someone who was more anxiously attached, where I and that ex of mine called me in, I want to say on this, because it was a very loving call in, but it was like I kind of demanded perfection in a way. Like I needed my date night with him to look like so, or otherwise he didn't care about me. Like that was the story, right? And so I've really, I think, let go of, and I'm practicing allowing for those moments where I can let this little thing slide that I think before I would have felt like I had to like really hone in on. But okay, my partner just had a moment of whatever, snapping at me, or maybe saying something in a certain way, or feeling a little bit of that avoidant thing, and it's like, can I just let this go right now? Like I think I can, because I don't need to battle like every little thing, and I feel secure enough and grounded enough to not have to chase that part.
Absolutely. And I've been noticing this, is that the more things that you do that build up the secure relationship, the more comfortable you are with, it becomes a little bit more rubbery. So things that I think would have like upset my partner before, seeming to bounce back, but it's because she has a stack of absolutely undeniable evidence that on the whole we're doing the right things, and I have the same. So both of us have like, it feels like a lot more of a rubber sort of bounce back, where things that might have been bigger conversations or taken longer to recover, we seem to just like move into repair really fast. And we also are like quite good at injecting a bit of humor, even if we're in a bit of disconnection. We'll like joke back and forth a little bit. I love that. Even in it, which is quite good. But I think both of us are really starting to move towards this like secure, like I can just feel it. We're both starting to move more into a secure area, which I think is really good. But you see people that have that much larger part of the like pie
insecure.
As anxious, and they can do some wild things when they are activated, like that. Like someone who properly has an anxious attachment style, the way that the anxious attachment styles can act out.
I've been
like
there.
Things you've never seen.
There, I know. It's and it's so like you get that shame spiral after, because you're like, oh my god, like, and you really beat yourself up over it. I did for sure, But I have so much compassion if you are someone who resonates with that. Like, I was there 1,000%, so many times over. But yes, moving more towards that secure attachment and being with a partner, because it isn't just about us to just deal with all this shit on our own or whatever. Like, it really matters who you're with. And like, I love what you're saying about building up that secure attachment that is like, it's more that, so that when there are those moments where it's maybe feeling a little more insecure, it's not a big deal. You're going to bounce back. What your overall relationship pattern is, and you're going to be okay. You're going to work it out no matter what's happening right now.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, because like I said, these anxious attachment styles, if it's left unchecked, it can be absolutely wild, and it doesn't seem to map onto anything. Like, if you've seen your friends go through this, sometimes they are like really intelligent, successful, they're doing so many things that you're like, this person is so smart, and then you watch them be so crazy in a relationship. You're like, how is it the same person? Like, how can you do this at such a high level and then be a complete nutter in, another aspect of your life?
It's not that related, right? It's just like, all the unresolved trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm also glad you bring that up because, and like, I just got back on one of the dating apps recently, just for, I know. So Tim, that like two of my pretty serious relationships ended relatively recently. One in particular that like I'm still grieving that. My heart is not open to like new emotional or romantic connections, but I decided to go back on the fields the other day just for a more casual thing. I was like, let me just test the water to see if I can even do that. But the reason why I'm thinking about this is that one of the things I've had to learn is to get faster at really filtering people out, where when we're talking about these dynamics where it's like, feeling insecure attachment kind of vibes, like you're not really liking how they're communicating maybe, or just the feeling you're getting. And it's like, I think that when we have built something up with somebody where there is more secure than not, then okay, we can maybe weather those things a little bit better. We can know that this is not the whole picture. But I think sometimes the other pattern can be that we get into something new, there isn't that trust built up, but we're like we keep knocking into these like red flags, maybe they're yellow flags, but it's like how
maybe
much
they're green flags, but it's so fashionable to think about red flags.
Yes,
like,
but how
that's
do
a
we
red flag.
feel?
Like, actually, that's a green flag. Yeah.
But how do we feel, right? And like I've noticed even with a couple people who like I literally had just like a few texts back and forth, and I was already feeling like I'm feeling like I'm being like a little bit like sold to, like it was like a sales pitch, almost like trying to convince me of something, or I was like a little too pushy, or like this person. I felt very unclear. Like it felt very like lack of communication and clarity there. So I think like there's also that piece of like, hey, you don't need to like keep going with something or some dynamic where you don't feel like there's being trust and security being built up. And you're just kind of getting this insecure dynamic from the get-go, and it's like just this ongoing vibe.
Yeah. And it's almost like a different, I think as well, something that I've been thinking about a bit is this like, it's almost two separate like aspects. One is like dating, and then the other part is like being in a relationship. You know, it's like you almost need to approach dating with almost a different mindset than being in a long-term relationship, I think, in some ways.
I hear what you're saying. I guess the thing that I think about is well, the long-term relationship starts somewhere, right? And so I think a lot of times when we don't watch out for these things from the get-go, when we are meeting people for the first time, that can just continue because that's the dynamic that we started out in. And we didn't stop it when we're like, actually, this is not working for me. Actually, this I feel very insecure in this relationship because of XYZ.
Or worse, if you're not aware of any of this, if you're listening to this, it's the first time you're hearing any of this stuff, you might be unconsciously seeking, like attachment, anxious and avoidant people always just find each other.
I know.
Right? So you're going to have that same pattern over and over and over and over again, because someone who's maybe more avoidant is going to see you and be like, wow, this person has so many thoughts and feelings, like they're like so alive, they've got so many friends, and they're invested in all these different friendships and things happening, and then you meet an avoidant and you're like, they are so mysterious. Wow, how they've got like they're so interesting because they're like, I wonder they're really thinking, and like I love how they're so stoic and they're so steady, and like finally I could be with someone that's like really steady and you know, like they have all of the things that's so different to you that you're like, oh, they're probably a really good person because,
Tim.
Right, you seek them out, you hunt them down, and
unconsciously,
maybe,
people unconsciously,
right, unconsciously,
but
unconsciously
to become consciously aware of the pattern.
So that's why like looking at some of this stuff, researching it, understanding it can be pretty cool because especially when you're first dating, you're seeing someone's absolute best self right?
Yeah.
You're seeing the best. And if the best is bad, then the real them is going to be like significantly worse. I might be a little bit unfair. Like first dates, I think we should be a little bit more compassionate. I think people can get nervous, and like you're not gonna. If people are more shy, they might struggle to open up. If you're more extroverted, you might talk too much. You maybe the first date be a bit more compassionate. Just sort of make sure there's no like glaring red flags. I don't know though, Janice. Everyone has their own dating style and
For sure,
an own kind of like way of doing it.
Yeah. Well. Oh my God, Tim! I feel like we could talk forever, but is there anything we missed? We're at an hour, and
wow, that went fast. Or at least it did for us. I hope it did for the listeners as well.
Absolutely.
This was an amazing conversation, Janice. Again, thank you so much for having me on. Love the work that you're doing, and just it's been so wonderful meeting you, get to know you, listening to the podcast, and being part of it. So thank you.
Thank you, and I can't wait to be part of your podcast.
Yes, exactly. It's going to be a fun one.
I know. Well, thank you again. I definitely have to have you on for part 2 because we have more to talk about, I'm sure. Amazing. But yeah, thanks for your time today.
Cheers.
Appreciate you.